prince migrated into the Daluo continent.
Dragon martial soul.
Yu Xiaogang, seeing your astonishing talent, immediately insisted on mapping out your cultivation path. An ancient dragon should focus on the defense system.
Daluo has already proven with his ancient dragon
that this is the only correct path. You simply smiled after hearing him
Daluo
out.
walking the path of defense
proves
only
that the ancient dragon can be a defense system soul
Since when was it
decreed that an ancient dragon must be limited to defense?
My bones may serve as armor,
but they can just as easily become
as long
blades.
as my enemies perish swiftly
I
enough.
have no need for defense. My bones are indomitable,
Capable of manifesting as
yet
armor.
equally capable of shifting into bone blades, bone swords, bone spears, or
Furthermore,
bone spikes. An ancient dragon commands the power of space.
Above all else, it is
and
a dragon.
only then,
its bones.
The dragon tribe possesses immense power. Razor-sharp claws and fangs, far surpassing those of ordinary spirit beasts. If one were to assume that simply because it is composed
it must
of
hide
bones,
in the rear to endure attacks,
would that not be completely disregarding
the
draconic traits inherent in the ancient dragon?
Hearing these words,
Yu Xiaogang's expression has gradually started to look grim. Ancient dragons are born with formidable defensive capabilities, even without specifically absorbing spirit rings to boost defense. Their defensive power far surpasses that of ordinary
to play to
beasts.
one's strengths and avoid weaknesses.
Does not mean focusing solely on one advantage of the martial soul,
and using all spirit rings to reinforce only that aspect.
If all my spirit rings were used exclusively to strengthen defense, then apart from standing still and taking hits,
what else could I possibly do?
When facing an enemy whose speed far exceeds my own, I cannot catch up to them.
When facing an enemy with long-range attacks,
I am forced into a purely defensive
When facing
stance.
an enemy whose attack power can shatter my defenses,
I lack even the means to counterattack. Guling stared straight at Yu Xiaogang and asked indifferently, can a path like this truly be called the most suitable path for the ancient dragon martial soul? Yu Xiaogang's lips trembled slightly, yet no sound escaped them. Every word from Guling seemed to strike precisely at the flaws in his theories, especially that final remark. The ancient dragon martial soul itself already possesses formidable defensive capabilities. If one were to continue stacking defense, it would indeed make the defensive power even more terrifying. But once faced with an enemy that counters defense-type spirit masters, and it becomes all too easy to fall into a situation where you can only take hits without being able to strike back. At the speechless Yu Xiaogang, his voice remaining calm as he spoke. I have never denied the path chosen by Daluo. He chose to become the sturdiest of shields. That was his choice. But I do not wish to become a second Daluo, nor do I wish to hide behind others forever, waiting for the enemy to come and attack me. My bones can serve as armor, or as razor-sharp blades. My ancient dragon martial soul should never be limited to merely enduring attacks. As he spoke, Guling raised his right hand. A wisp of pale soul power slowly emerged from his palm. Faintly, it seemed as if the ancient dragon is roaring silently within. As long as the enemy dies fast enough, I naturally have no need for defense. The path I choose to walk is the path of ultimate and treacherous power attack. After a ridiculously brief silence, Yu Xiaogang seemed to finally snap back to reality. Though his face flushed a deep crimson, he still whipped his sleeve violently and bellowed in rage. You are nothing but a 6-year-old child. You only awakened your martial soul a few days ago. You haven't even absorbed a single spirit ring yet. What do you know about martial soul? What do you know about cultivation? Everything you just said is merely a product of your own imagination. A reckless and baseless conjecture. Yu Xiaogang stared intensely at Go, as if he believed that by raising his voice loud enough and will be able to reclaim the dignity lost just moments ago. Although the ancient dragon martial soul bears the word dragon in its name, entirely different from dragon-type martial souls that possess true flesh and blood. The ancient dragon lacks powerful muscles, lacks abundant vitality and blood, does not possess the terrifying explosive power of a true dragon clan. All that sustains it is a rigid skeletal frame. This predetermines that the ancient dragon martial soul, in terms of strength, speed, and explosive capability, lightning Tyrannosaurus a top-tier beast martial soul of that caliber. As he spoke of this, Yu Xiaogang's tone unexpectedly regained its sense of confidence. With his hands clasped behind his back and forth behind the desk, and continued. The greatest taboo for a spirit master is to highlight their weaknesses while neglecting their strengths. The greatest asset of the ancient dragon martial soul is its skeletal structure. Bones can shield a spirit master from attacks. They can also, upon the activation of the spirit avatar, if one continuously absorbs body spirit rings from defensive type spirit the density of the bones, as well as their hardness and regenerative capabilities. Once their cultivation reaches a sufficient level of power, an ancient dragon spirit master can even achieve full body ossification, using their own body as a barrier to deflect enemy attacks for their teammates. This is the true value of the ancient dragon martial soul. Yu Xiaogang spoke with increasing rapidity. In contrast, the assault-type path you propose, I find it completely unfeasible. While the bones are indeed exceptionally sharp, lack the durability of a metal-type martial soul. Once those bones are used as weapons to clash head-on with an enemy, it is highly likely to result in a Pyrrhic
inflicting
victory.
heavy damage upon
Furthermore,
oneself
the
while
ancient
harming
dragon
the foe.
martial soul itself
And
is
you are
inherently
even less
heavy.
adept at
If you
speed.
force yourself to pursue raw attack power, not only will you fail to catch up with an agility attack
but
system,
you may
soul
even
master, exhaust your soul power excessively, losing the defensive advantage you originally possessed. By then, your attacks will be inferior
And
to
a
theirs.
true power
attack system soul master would neither be able to match an agility attack system,
nor would
soul
your
master
defense
in
be
speed.
effective.
Having
A
a
complete
complete mess due to an improper soul
At
ring
this
configuration. Yu Xiaogang suddenly came to a halt, raised his hand to point at Guling, and declared sternly, "The only outcome will be that you waste your innate full spirit power in vain. The fact that Bone Deluo could become the continent's top-tier defensive type titled Deluo is proof enough that my theory is correct. The martial dragon spirit should focus on the defensive path." Having said all that, Yu Xiaogang's expression regained its composure and certainty. Standing beside him, Tang Sen listened, lost in deep
Although
thought.
he
Felt that what Guling had said
carried
just now
some weight.
The analysis Yu Xiaogang provided now seemed far more comprehensive. An ancient dragon without possessing
and
only
blood,
a skeletal
such
frame,
a
martial soul, did indeed seem better suited for defense instead of a direct frontal assault. However, faced with this entire heap of theoretically sound arguments from Yu Xiaogang, Guling's expression remained completely unchanged. He looked at Yu Xiaogang and asked indifferently, "Grandmother, are you finished?" Yu Xiaogang's face darkened as he retorted, "What, even now? Do you still believe your own ideas are correct? Is it correct? Why not give it a try and find out?" Guling slowly raised his right hand, and the next moment, a chilling and formidable ripple of spirit power suddenly erupted from within his body. Ancient dragon avatar, roar, accompanied by a low, resonant dragon's roar. A massive, ghostly white phantom abruptly emerged from behind Guling. It was none other than a ferocious. Its massive body is composed entirely of ghostly white dragon bones. The colossal dragon head is held high. Two curved bone horns extend backward. Within its hollow eye sockets burn two clusters of eerie, pale white flames. And on either side of the ancient dragon, a pair of enormous bone wings sprout. The bone wings are devoid of flesh or feathers, with only sharp, pale wing bones extending outward, fully unfurled, almost shrouding the vast space behind Guling. At the same time, a series of teeth gritting, sounds of grinding bones echoed. Guling's arms were the first to undergo a transformation. Plates of pale bone armor covered the surface of his arms, spreading from his wrists all the way to his shoulders, connecting together in a seamless fit. Immediately after, his hands began to elongate, with sharp bone claws sprouting from his fingertips. Each bone claw shimmered with a chilling, heart-stopping gleam. Finally, a dragon's tail formed from ghastly white vertebrae, slowly extended from behind him. The most eerie part was that the bone tail did not hang stiffly against the ground, but moved as if it were a living creature, swaying slowly behind Guling. He looked exactly like a young ancient dragon in a human guise. Observing Guling after his martial soul avatar was unleashed, Tang San's pupils contracted slightly. Yu Xiaogang could not help but take half a step back. However, he quickly forced himself to steady his stance. He said in a cold voice, "What does that even prove? Bone armor covering the body. Does it not just prove that the ancient dragon primary ability is defense?" Guling retorted with a question. As soon as his voice fell, his right arm suddenly lifted. The bone armor covering his right arm began to ripple and shift rapidly. The originally thick, heavy bones converging steadily toward his wrist. With a sharp crack, a long, pale bone blade sprouted from the outer side of his scaled wrist. The bone blade was over a foot long, its surface far from smooth, instead lined with tiny, razor-sharp serrations. Guling flicked his hand casually to the side. Even the wooden chair nearby was sliced cleanly in half by the bone blade, without making much of a sound. The chair, now severed in two, crashed to the floor with a dull thud. Before Yu Xiaogang could even speak, the bone tail behind Wuling suddenly lunged forward. IPFFT. The razor-sharp tailbone instantly pierced through the corner of the desk. Bone tail. The sturdy wooden board was as fragile as a sheet of thin paper. Immediately following this, the two bone spurs behind Wuling's suddenly detached from his body. Swish, swish. Two pale afterimages streaked past Yu Xiaogang, piercing precisely into the wall behind him. The rigid bone spurs sank deep into the thick wall, leaving only a short segment exposed. The office fell into an instant, deathly silence. Tang Sen stared at the bone spurs embedded in the wall, then shifted his gaze to the bone blades on the bone spirit's arms. His eyes were filled with utter shock. Guling had not absorbed any spirit ring. What he just used was certainly not any spirit skill. This was entirely an innate ability of the bone dragon martial soul itself. Yu Xiaogang's lips trembled slightly as he spoke. without even a spirit ring attached. The bone dragon martial soul already possesses such terrifying offensive power. This is impossible. Guling paid no heed to his loss of composure, merely controlling the bone blade on his arm to slowly retract. At the same time, the two bone spurs embedded in the wall vibrated slightly. Guided by his spirit power, they detached from the wall on their own, flying back to Guling's side, and reconnected to the skeletal structure behind his shoulders. The entire process was seamless, as if those bone spurs had never left his body at all. Guling looked at Xiaogang, asked with a calm expression, "Grandmother, do you still believe that the ancient dragon's bones are only good for defense? My bone armor can transform into bone blades. My spine can manifest as a dragon's tail, and my bone spurs can detach from my body to launch attacks against distant foes. Furthermore, as long as I have sufficient spirit that have left my body can still return to me." Speaking of which, Guling raised his right hand, his sharp dragon claws slowly clenching into a fist. One possessed these abilities even before absorbing any spirit rings. If the spirit rings I absorb in the future can continue to strengthen the sharpness of my bones, as well as my control, proliferation, and restructuring my offensive repertoire will only keep expanding. In close quarters, I can utilize my bone claws and bone blades. Utilize bone spurs and bone spears for long-range combat. If the enemy manages to block my frontal assault, I can even manipulate my bones to strike from the flank, or even launch an attack from behind them. This is what I call a cunning power attack style. Having said that, Guling glanced at the wooden chair snapped in two, then looked at the hole pierced through the desk by his bone tail, and said in a deep voice, "Master, you mentioned earlier that the ancient dragon possesses next powerful offensive capabilities. But I believe what truly determines attack power has never been about whether one possesses whether the martial soul can harm the enemy. My martial soul has only just awakened, yet it already possesses these means of attack. And yet, you haven't even truly understood my martial soul. Simply because Bone Luo follows the path of a defense system, you conclude that I can only follow the same path." Guling's tone paused slightly. A hint of mockery flickered in his eyes. "Is this the martial soul theory you've spent years researching?" Upon hearing that final remark, Xiaogang's face turned a deep, liver-like shade of purple. He glared intensely at Guling, the veins on his forehead throbbing rhythmically. He was panting heavily like a wounded ox. All those claims he made earlier about the insisting it must follow the path of a defense now felt like a series of resounding slaps to his own face. It struck his face with brutal force. Guling hadn't even absorbed a spirit ring yet his ancient dragon martial soul had already demonstrated capabilities in multi-angle combat. This meant that the bizarre power attack style Guling mentioned was not some baseless fantasy, but rather something built upon the very nature ancient dragon martial soul itself. Xiaogang desperately wanted to refute this, but the facts were laid out right before his eyes. No matter how many theories he may spout, he cannot change the fact that Guling's ancient dragon martial soul possesses immense offensive power by nature. A moment later, Xiaogang finally reached his breaking point. He roared, "Arrogant brat! You have absolutely no respect for your elders." He suddenly raised his hand and pointed toward the office door, his voice turning shrill with rage. "Even if your martial soul does possess some offensive capabilities, that doesn't necessarily mean your path of cultivation is the correct one. You are merely relying on the superior quality of your martial soul, arrogantly assuming you know everything. I offered you my guidance out of kindness. Yet you contradict me at every turn, and even deliberately show off your martial soul before me. Someone as arrogant and conceited as you, who lacks respect for their elders, even with innate full spirit power, will never go far in the future. Get out of my sight right now. Xiaogang, have no need for a student like you, and I will never offer you another word of guidance." Faced with Xiaogang's furious rebuke, Guling did not show the slightest hint of anger. He slowly retracted his ancient dragon martial soul, the bone armor on his body, the bone spurs, and the bone tail gradually fading into pale spirit power that flowed back into his body. "I have never once entertained the thought of taking you as my master. It was you who begged me to come here." Guling looked at Xiaogang and said indifferently, "As for your guidance, I have even less need for it, after all. Someone who hasn't even figured out the abilities of my martial soul is absolutely not qualified to dictate my future path of cultivation." Having said that, Guling turned and walked out of the office. "Stop right there." Xiaogang's angry voice came from behind. Yet Guling didn't even break her stride. Bang! The office door was slammed shut. Following Guling's departure, the room fell into silence once again. Xiaogang stood behind the desk, his chest heaving rhythmically. His expression remained grim to the extreme. He glanced at the severed piece of wood, then at the hole pierced through his desk by the bone tail. A flicker of shame and fury crossed his eyes. All these years of research into martial soul theory, only to be left utterly speechless today by a mere 6-year-old child. Even his own assessment of the ancient dragon martial soul was deemed erroneous by Guling if this were to spread. How could he still claim to be a grandmother of martial soul theory? At this thought, Yu Xiaogang's expression grew even more somber. Seeing this, Tang San, who stood nearby, hesitated for a moment, whispered, "Teacher, the abilities the 5 dragon martial soul just displayed do indeed seem well suited for a power attack system." Shut up! Before Tang Sen could finish his words, he was sternly interrupted by Yu Xiaogang. Yu Xiaogang turned his gaze toward Tang San and said in a deep voice, "Zisan, do not be deceived by the display of his ancient dragon martial soul. The abilities manifested when a martial soul is first awakened only prove that he possesses a certain potential for offense, but they cannot determine the most suitable cultivation path for his future. A spirit master's cultivation is a long and arduous journey. It is by no means something that can be judged by a momentary display." Tang Sen nodded slightly, but remained silent. Yu Xiaogang took a deep breath, striving to restore calm to his tone as he said, "Gu Ling possesses innate full spirit power and has awakened a top-tier martial soul like the ancient dragon. So he certainly has the capital to be proud. But precisely because his talent is so exceptional, he becomes even more deaf to the advice of others. He fancies himself smarter than everyone else, believing that just because he has awakened his martial soul, he can overturn the wisdom accumulated by predecessors over countless years. For such a person, no matter how great their innate talent will be severely limited." Yu Xiaogang stood with his hands clasped behind his back, shut office door, and said coldly, "I saw that he possessed exceptional talent. I couldn't bear to see such a raw talent and precious jade go astray. That is why I was willing to offer him some guidance." Yet, not only did he show no gratitude, but he even openly questioned my theories in front of his martial soul to wreck the office property, leaving me in a humiliating position. Someone so ungrateful and so lacking in respect for his teachers and the path of not worth nurturing. Upon hearing this, Tang San furrowed his brows slightly. He couldn't shake the feeling that things were not as Yu Xiaogang had described them. From beginning to end, Wu Ling had never once acted out of anger. The one who first resorted to insults and escalated the situation beyond repair was actually his own teacher. However, Yu Xiaogang was his teacher after all. So Tang Sen ultimately chose not to voice the doubts lingering in his heart. Tang Sen remained silent. Yu Xiaogang assumed he had accepted his words. His tone softened slightly as he continued, "Zisan, you are different from him. Although you also possess innate full spirit power, you know how to humbly accept guidance, and even more so, how to respect your teacher. Talent can only determine one's starting point, but character and conduct are what truly determine how far a person can ultimately go. Gu Ling may seem clever, but in reality, he is merely being smart. If he can argue with me today over his cultivation path, then in the future, he will surely find to question everyone who tries to help him. A person like him is arrogant and stubborn and self-opinionated. He is destined never to become a true powerhouse." Yu Xiaogang sat back down in his chair, gazing at the wreckage scattered across the floor. He let out a cold snort. "What a hopeless case, truly unteachable. Since he refuses to accept my guidance, then let him continue to cultivate along his so-called bizarre offensive path. When he eventually hits a wall and ends up battered, he will naturally understand who was right and who was wrong today." Upon hearing this, Tang San, standing to the side, did in not his mind immediately the scene of Gu Ling's martial soul manifestation just moments ago resurfaced, that can transform into sharp blades, bone spurs capable of detaching from the body to strike, and that bone tail which moves as if it were a living creature. I must admit, the abilities Gu Ling just displayed are truly astonishing. At the very least, judging solely by offensive capability, it doesn't seem like a purely defensive type martial soul at all. But soon, Tang Sen shook his head, thinking to himself, how could I have let Gu Ling's words make me doubt my teacher's martial soul theory? After all, Gu Ling is only 6 years old. No matter how gifted he may be, he has only just awakened his martial soul a few days ago. Regarding spirit beasts, spirit rings, and the developmental paths of martial souls, how much could he possibly know? On the other hand, my teacher, Yu Xiaogang, has spent years researching martial soul theory, possesses profound expertise regarding various martial souls, as well as an in-depth understanding of spirit rings. Moreover, back then, I had only presented a martial soul certificate issued by the Spirit Hall. Yet, teacher was able to deduce my other martial soul solely from the information regarding my innate full spirit power and my blue-silver gross martial soul. Such keen insight is certainly not something an ordinary spirit master could possess. Thinking of this, the lingering doubt in Tang San's heart gradually dissipated. Although what Wu Ling said just now makes some sense, it is ultimately just the thoughts of a 6-year-old child. How could the cultivation of a martial soul be determined by a few mere words? Since the teacher has determined that the ancient soul is best suited for the defense system, there must be a valid reason for it. Perhaps Gu Ling can currently rely on the inherent traits of the ancient dragon martial soul to display impressive offensive capabilities. However, as one's spirit power level continues to rise, this advantage may not necessarily be maintained forever. At this thought, Tang San looked toward Yu Xiaogang and said softly, Teacher, I think what you said makes sense. Guling is only 6 years old after
Having
all.
just awakened his martial spirit.
Many things he perceives might just be
based
on his own personal whims. Once he truly begins his cultivation in the future, perhaps he will come to understand your good intentions. Hearing Tang San's words, Yu Xiaogang's previously livid complexion finally softened a little. Especially after being repeatedly defied by Guling just moments ago. Tang San's acknowledgement at this moment brought him a great sense of relief. Zisan, it is good that you can think this way. Yu Xiaogang nodded, said with earnest advice. On the path of cultivation, the greatest taboo is self-conceit. Talent is certainly important, but without proper theory as a guide. The greater one's talent, the easier it is to go astray. Guling was simply too arrogant. Tang San nodded. Then he glanced at the still. Yu Xiaogang, visibly incensed, spoke up to persuade him. Master, please do not be angry. Since Guling is unwilling to listen, let him go and try it for himself. If he truly realizes he is wrong in the future, he will naturally come to understand. Upon hearing this, Yu Xiaogang took a deep breath, slowly suppressing the rage in his heart. Very well. Since he has chosen this path himself, then no matter what the outcome may be in the future, it has nothing to do with me. Having said that, Yu Xiaogang ceased mentioning Guling's bone age and instead picked up the book on the table once more, continuing to instruct Tang San on the knowledge of spirit beasts and spirit rings. On the other side, after leaving Yu Xiaogang's office, Guling did not take what had just happened to heart at all. As for how Yu Xiaogang truly perceives him, he couldn't care less. As for the path of cultivation he should take in the future, it is certainly not for an outsider to decide for him. Moreover, through the argument just now, Guling has become even more certain of his own convictions. The ancient dragon martial soul is innately endowed with formidable defensive capabilities. Since that is the case for his future spirit rings, there is naturally no need to continue blindly reinforcing his defense. What he truly needs to do is to fully unleash the bizarre and offensive capabilities of the ancient dragon martial soul. Bone blades, bone spurs, bone spears, bone tails, and even manipulating bones detached from his own body to launch attacks from any unexpected angle. This is the path of cultivation Guling desires, an ultimate, treacherous form of power attack. Of course, it is still a bit too early to consider these things, because for Guling, the most important thing right now is to obtain his first spirit ring. He already possesses innate full spirit power. Once he acquires his first spirit ring, he will officially become a spirit master. With this thought in mind, Guling did not return to his dormitory. Instead, he headed straight toward the Nuoding Academy's administrative office. Before long, he arrived outside the door of the administrative office. Knock, knock. Guling raised his hand and a voice drifted out from within. Guling pushed open the door. Inside the academic affairs office sat several academy instructors. The one seated at the very back was none other than Director Su, who oversees the academy's academic affairs. Looked up, and upon seeing that it was Guling who had entered, he recognized him immediately. After all, Guling had only enrolled a few days ago, and among this year's freshmen, one of the few with innate full spirit power, and also possessing a top-tier beast martial soul like the ancient Director Su naturally had a deep impression of him. Director Su set aside what he was holding as Guling approached. He asked with some confusion, "Why are you here?" Guling walked up to the desk and got straight to the point. "Director Su, there is something I would like to ask the Academy for help with." "What is it?" Guling said. "I have been enrolled for several days now. My soul power is the innate full soul power of rank 10. All I am missing now is my first soul ring. So I would like to ask if the Academy could arrange for a teacher to accompany me to the hunting forest to help me obtain my first soul ring." Upon hearing this, Director Su was slightly taken aback. He quickly regained his composure and realized, that's right, the child standing before him is no ordinary freshman. Guling possesses innate full spirit power, while typical freshmen entering the Academy might need to cultivate for a long period before reaching level 10 to obtain their first spirit ring. Guling, from the very moment his martial soul awakened, had already met the criteria to acquire his first spirit ring. Now that he has officially enrolled in the Academy naturally has a responsibility to assist him in obtaining his spirit ring. Especially since he is a genius with innate full spirit power and an ancient if his cultivation were to be delayed simply because he lacks a spirit ring, that would be a true waste of talent. At this thought, Director Su wore a more serious expression and said, "You are right. Given your situation, you should indeed obtain your first spirit ring as soon as possible. The Academy can make arrangements for this matter." Speaking of which, Director Su paused for a moment before asking again. "However, before we set off, you had better tell me first, do you have any thoughts regarding your first spirit ring?" For instance, what type of spirit beast are you looking to hunt? Upon hearing this, Gu Ling's lips slowly curled into a smile as he replied, "Of course I do. My ancient dragon martial soul is possesses formidable defensive capabilities. So for my first spirit ring, I do not intend to further reinforce my defense. I wish to seek out a spirit beast with sufficient offensive power, preferably one with sturdy bones, possessing sharp bone spurs, or offensive traits like razor-sharp claws. If it could also possess some degree of versatility, that would be even better. I hope my first spirit ability, it should be able to strengthen the attack of my ancient dragon martial soul, instead of just granting me an extra layer of bone or adding another spirit ability that serves only to take a beating." After listening to Gu Ling, Director Sun nodded thoughtfully. If it were any ordinary student, he might have considered such an idea a bit too risky. But Gu Ling's situation was clearly different. The ancient dragon itself was an exceptionally powerful beast martial soul, judging from the information registered when Gu Ling first enrolled. After this martial soul is manifested, it can significantly enhance both physical fitness and skeletal strength. Since the martial soul itself already possesses sufficiently excellent defensive capabilities, then using spirit rings to compensate for the lack of offensive power does indeed seem to be a sound strategy. In fact, to a certain extent, this approach could actually allow making your abilities more well-rounded. At this thought, Director Sun nodded and said, "Your reasoning does hold some merit. When a spirit master chooses a spirit ring, they shouldn't blindly follow someone else's path. One must decide based on the unique characteristics of their own martial soul. Since you have already thought it through, then proceed according to your own plan." Hearing this, Lu Lin's eyes brightened slightly as he said, "So, Director Su, you are willing to take me to hunt a spirit beast and obtain my spirit ring?" Director Su smiled and replied, "Of course. You are now a student of our Nuoding Academy, and you possess innate full spirit power. Helping a student hunt their first spirit ring is a duty the Academy is bound to fulfill. As it happens, I have no pressing matters tomorrow, so we shall depart at dawn. Wait for me at the Academy gate. I will personally take you to the hunting forest outside Nuoding City. We can search for a suitable spirit beast for you along the way, and decide which spirit ring to absorb as we go." Upon hearing this, Wu Ling nodded earnestly. "Thank you, Director Su." Director Su waved his hand and said, "It's nothing. Go back and prepare yourself." Although the hunting forest is a place where the Empire keeps spirit beasts in captivity, it is home to real soul beasts. There are still certain dangers lurking within. Get some rest early tonight. Recharge your energy. Understood. Gu Ling replied with a nod, not wanting to disturb Director Su any further. She turned and left the academic affairs office. Day, just as the sky began to brighten, Gu Ling had already finished packing her things, arriving at the gates of Nuoding Academy. Director Su had clearly arrived even earlier. By now, he had already changed the attire he usually wore at the academy, donning a set of fitted gear designed for mobility, with simple wilderness supplies hanging from his waist. Seeing Gu Ling approach, Director Sun nodded in satisfaction and said, "You've arrived quite early indeed." Gu Ling smiled and replied, "Obtaining my first spirit ring. Naturally, I don't want to be late." Good. Hearing this, Director Sun nodded with a gratified smile. Then he chuckled and said, "Let's go. Let's strive to find you a suitable spirit beast today." As they spoke, the two prepared to leave the academy. But just then, at this very moment, two figures happened to emerge from the academy. One of them was dressed in simple black robes, with a somewhat slender build. It was none other than Xiaogang, and walking beside him was Tang San. Tang San was carrying a simple bundle on his back, evidently preparing to head out as well. The two parties crossed paths right at the academy gates. Gu Ling caught sight of Xiaogang, but merely cast a fleeting, before turning her gaze away. Xiaogang naturally noticed Gu Ling as well, recalling the events of yesterday. His expression instantly turned somewhat unnatural, especially when he noticed Director Su standing beside Gu Ling. His brows could not help but furrow slightly. However, neither side took the initiative to speak. Director Su, however, seemed rather surprised and asked, "Master, you're up so early. Where are you planning to take Tang San?" Hearing Director Su's inquiry, Xiaogang's expression returned to its usual calm, and he replied indifferently, "The Sen possesses innate full spirit power. I intend to take him to the hunting forest to find a suitable spirit beast for him and obtain his first spirit ring." Hearing this, Director Su burst into a smile and said, "So that's how it is. What a coincidence. Gu Ling also possesses innate full spirit power. I was just planning to take him to the hunting forest today to help him obtain his first spirit ring." As he spoke, Director Su glanced at Xiaogang and then at Tang San. "Since we are all heading to the same destination, why don't we just go together? We can look out for each other along the way." Hearing these words, Xiaogang instinctively glanced at Gu Ling, yet Gu Ling paid him no mind at all, standing calmly by Director Su's side. Although Yu Xiaogang still felt a lingering displeasure from yesterday's event, the hunting forest was a place that still posed a danger to him. Director Su was, after all, a teacher at Nodding Academy, and having another spirit master for company would naturally provide an extra layer of protection. Besides, he was also curious to see what kind of first spirit ring Guling intended to bestow upon his ancient dragon martial soul. Thinking of this, Yu Xiaogang nodded and said, "Very well, that way, even if you encounter any danger, to look after you both." Director Su smiled and said, "Then let us go together." Tang San, standing to the side, cast his gaze toward Guling. His eyes glittered with a hint of curiosity. Following the words of Yu Xiaogang yesterday, he had grown even more convinced of his teacher's judgment. In Tang San's view, although Guling possessed a top-tier martial soul like the ancient dragon, he was, after all, only everything 6 years old. Luotia had claimed was, to a large extent, merely personal conjecture regarding the martial soul. When it comes to actually obtaining a spirit ring, it is not nearly as simple as it seems. Once a spirit ring is absorbed, it is nearly impossible to replace. If one makes the wrong choice for their first spirit ring, it will inevitably hinder a spirit master's future path of cultivation. Thinking of this, Tang San could not help but wonder what kind of spirit beast Guling would choose for that so-called extremely bizarre and powerful first spirit ring. Soon enough, the four of them rented a carriage and departed from Nodding Academy. The hunting forest is not particularly far from Nodding City. Along the way, Yu Xiaogang continuously enlightened Tang San with all sorts of knowledge regarding spirit beasts. The cultivation level of a spirit beast can be determined many different aspects. For instance, its size, its physical traits, and certain unique changes on its body. Little San, your martial soul is the blue silver grass. The blue silver grass itself is inherently too weak. Therefore, it must be imbued with greater power through a spirit ring. I have mapped out a path for you as a control-type spirit master. So, for your first spirit ring, it would be best to seek out a snake-type spirit beast possess traits like resilience and venomous properties. These abilities are perfectly suited for the blue silver grass. Tang San listened with utmost focus, nodding from time to time. Director Su sat to the side. He didn't bother to interrupt. Guling had even less interest in joining the conversation. His mind was entirely preoccupied with one spirit ring. What kind of spirit beast could truly allow his ancient dragon martial soul to take its first step toward ultimate power? A simple boost in strength was clearly too mundane. A mere increase in sharpness wasn't what Guling desired either. What he was truly pursuing, it is the unpredictability that makes it impossible for enemies to ever discern where exactly his attacks will emerge. If he were merely to swing his bone claws or bone blades, how would that differ from any ordinary power attack system spirit master? That would never be worthy of the vision he holds in his ancient dragon martial soul. The group continued their journey forward just like that. After traveling for some time, a vast forest finally began to emerge, appeared within everyone's line of sight. Ancient, towering trees stretched on endlessly, their massive canopies intertwined with one another, completely obscuring the sunlight within. And along the perimeter of the forest stood tall, imposing iron fences. A multitude of heavily armed soldiers stood guard near the entrance. This was none other than the spirit hunting forest near Nodding City, a place for spirit masters the spirit hunting forest. The surrounding lake grew significantly dimmer. Towering ancient trees rose from the ground one after another, their dense branches and leaves intertwined, blocking out most of the sunlight from above. Director Su led the way at the front, observing the surroundings for any signs of movement. Yu Xiaogang walked alongside Tang San, continuing to explain various knowledge about spirit beasts to him throughout the journey. The four of them ventured deeper into the forest. About an hour later, suddenly a rustling sound came from ahead. Director Su immediately came to a halt. He raised his hand to signal the group to stop, his voice low and grave. "There's a spirit beast. Everyone, be careful." Guling and Tang San turned their gazes toward the direction simultaneously. They saw the low-lying shrubs ahead slowly parting. Following that, a creature the size of a millstone, a giant gray-brown tortoise, crawled out slowly. The shell on the giant tortoise's back was exceptionally thick and its surface covered in a layer of uneven gray rocks. It looks as if it is truly carrying a massive boulder on its back. Its forelimbs are thick and sturdy, with claws deeply embedded into the soil. With every step it crawls forward, it emits a faint, grating sound. Upon seeing this spirit beast, Yu Xiaogang's eyes lit up instantly. A rock-armored tortoise, almost without a moment's hesitation, he spoke up directly. Observing the patterns on its rock-armored back and the size of its body, its cultivation should be between 130 and 150 years. Although this spirit beast's offensive capabilities are mediocre, its defensive power is truly exceptional. Furthermore, it possesses the ability to fortify bones and armor. At this point, Yu Xiaogang seemed to have suddenly realized something. He turned his head to look at Director Su. "Director Su, Guling is quite lucky. This rock-armored turtle is perfectly suited to be his first spirit ring." Hearing these words, Gu Ling's brows furrowed slightly. Director Su was also taken aback, asking in confusion, "A perfect match for bone age?" Yu Xiaogang nodded, his face once again reflecting that confidence belonging to a master of theory as he continued. Gu Ling's martial soul is the ancient dragon. The most prominent characteristic of the ancient dragon martial soul is its incredibly dense providing bones, formidable defensive power. And the rock-powered turtle is precisely a soul beast renowned for its defense. If he absorbs its spirit ring, it is highly likely to further strengthen the bone density of his skeletal structure and perhaps even grant his ancient dragon a defensive capability akin to rock armor. In this way, he can thoroughly establish his foundation as a defense-type soul master starting from his very first spirit ring. Yu Xiaogang cast a deliberate glance at Gu Ling. It is not a bad thing for a young man to have his own ideas. But once a spirit ring is absorbed, there is no turning back. Yesterday, when you spoke of pursuing that extreme, unorthodox power path, that path lacks any mature theoretical foundation to support it. Now that a spirit beast, so perfectly suited to you, has appeared before us, to let it slip away would be a truly regrettable waste. Upon hearing this, Director Su did not make a decision immediately. Instead, he turned to look at Gu Ling, asking, "Gu Ling, what are your thoughts?" Gu Ling glanced at the rock-armored turtle not far away, then shifted his gaze back to Yu Xiaogang. "My thoughts? Naturally, it is not to absorb it." Yu Xiaogang furrowed his brows, said with a hint of displeasure, "Gu Ling, how much longer are you going to be this stubborn?" Gu Ling couldn't help but laugh and said, "Stubborn master? What I said just yesterday. Have you already forgotten it today? My ancient dragon martial soul itself possesses immense defensive power. Now you want me to absorb a rock-armored turtle to add even more defense to myself. I have a question to ask." And then what? Yu Xiaogang was taken aback. Gu Ling continued to press on. The first spirit ring increases defense. The second spirit ring continues to increase defense. The third spirit ring still increases defense. In the end, you cultivate yourself into a turtle that just takes a beating without fighting back. Yu Xiaogang's expression darkened completely, but Gu Ling gave him no chance to speak and continued. "Besides, I already used my own martial soul to prove it to you yesterday. The ancient dragon's bones can transform into bone claws and bone blades, and can even detach from my body to launch attacks 5 times over. My martial soul clearly possesses such exceptional offensive talent. Yet you choose to turn a blind eye, insisting that I abandon these advantages just to become a turtle that only knows how to take a beating." Gu Ling pointed toward the rock-armored turtle not far away. "This is not about playing to one's strengths and avoiding weaknesses. Idiocy. Gu Ling." Yu Xiaogang let out a low growl. "Do you even understand the theory of martial souls? I have spent years researching martial souls." "There you go again." Gu Ling interrupted him without a hint of courtesy. "Does years of research automatically equate to being correct? If longevity of research guaranteed truth, then is there any point for the entire spirit world to continue researching new martial soul theories?" This remark left Yu Xiaogang speechless once again. Director Su, standing nearby, wore a subtle expression, then at Gu Ling, at a loss for words for a moment. Tang San's brows gradually furrowed. Gu Ling suddenly shifted his gaze toward him and said abruptly, "Since the grandmother is so fond of discussing spirit theory, then I would like to pose a question." Yu Xiaogang's expression darkened as he asked in confusion. "What question?" Gu Ling raised a hand and pointed at Tang San, asking indifferently, "What path do you intend for Tang San's blue-silver grass to take?" Although Yu Xiaogang did not know why Gu Ling would suddenly ask this, he answered without the slightest hesitation. "Naturally, it is the control system blue-silver grass. Although it is merely an ordinary martial soul, it possesses traits like flexibility, extension, and binding. As long as it is supplemented with the appropriate spirit ring, it can fully develop into an excellent control ability." Speaking of this, Yu Xiaogang seemed to have finally regained his home turf. "I have already planned the first spirit ring for Little San, and a snake-type spirit beast would be an excellent choice for him. If he could acquire an ability related to binding or paralysis, or perhaps something involving toxins, it would significantly enhance the control capabilities of the blue-silver grass. If he continues to develop in this direction in the future, Little Sin could absolutely become an outstanding control-type spirit master." Upon hearing this, Gu Ling acted as if he had heard something laughable and said coldly, "So this is the theory you've spent years researching?" Yu Xiaogang frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Gu Ling did not answer. Instead, she walked up to Tang San, glanced at his right hand, and said, "Tang San, release your blue-silver grass martial soul." Tang San was slightly taken aback. "My martial soul, that's right." Tang San hesitated for a moment, but finally raised his right hand. A pale blue glow of soul power emerged. A slender stalk of blue-silver grass instantly sprouted from his palm. Guling pointed at the blue-silver grass and asked, "Master, what is this?" Yu Xiaogang's expression turned somewhat grim, and he replied in utter bewilderment, "It's blue-silver grass. What else could it be?" Guling said indifferently, "I know it's blue-silver grass. I'm asking, what type of plant is this?" Yu Xiaogang's brows furrowed even deeper. After a moment of silence, he spoke, "A vine-type plant. Since you already know, then things will be easier to handle." Guling reached out and gently flicked the blue-silver grass in Tang San's palm. The soft and slender blades of grass immediately coiled once around his finger. "Master, do you see it now? Blue-silver grass inherently possesses the ability to grow and control. Entanglement is a trait it possesses as a vine-type plant, an innate ability it was born with. So, here is the question." Wu Lin looked at Yu Xiaogang. "For a martial soul that can already entangle, why would you insist on wasting a first spirit ring just to grant it a so-called entanglement spirit skill? It's like a person who already has 2 legs. Yet you insisted on giving him a spirit ring that only grants a walking spirit skill. What difference does that make?" As these words were spoken, Director Su was stunned. Tang San also instinctively lowered his head to look at the blue-silver grass in his palm. Yu Xiaogang's expression stiffened instantly. His face turned from pale to livid. Rendered completely speechless, Guling continued, "The slots for spirit rings are incredibly precious. An ordinary spirit master only has 9 spirit ring slots in their entire lifetime. Although the first spirit ring is just the beginning, it determines the initial developmental direction of your martial soul. Blue-silver grass doesn't even need a spirit skill, most basic binding ability. Yet you still want to attach a binding-type spirit skill to it. If that isn't redundant, what is? Nonsense." Yu Xiaogang's expression shifted. He immediately retorted, "The innate binding of a martial soul versus a spirit skill. How could a reinforced binding possibly be the same? A spirit skill can significantly enhance the blue-silver grass's length and control capabilities." Guling nodded and said, "You are not wrong. A spirit skill can indeed strengthen it. But why must it be the binding that gets reinforced? Increasing hardness is possible. Increasing toxicity is possible. And increasing growth rate is also possible. Even enhancing vitality and regenerative abilities all incidentally make the blue-silver grass itself much tougher. Why must one waste a spirit skill slot to acquire an action that the martial soul can already perform on its own?" Yu Xiaogang's mouth twitched. Before he could speak, Guling continued, "More importantly, you haven't even grasped the true, most powerful trait of the blue-silver grass. The true strength of the blue-silver grass has never been about crowd control, but its vitality." Guling looked at the blue-silver grass scattered everywhere and said indifferently, "How is it possible for this thing to spread across the entire continent? It is in the forest. It is along the roadside. It is in the wild mountains. Even in places where it is difficult for ordinary plants to grow, you can still see blue-silver grass because it is weak and ordinary. It can be trampled underfoot or devoured by wild beasts. But as long as a single root remains, as long as a flicker of vitality survives, it can grow once more." Having said this, Guling slowly uttered a few words. "Wildfires cannot consume it all. The spring breeze brings it back to life." Upon hearing these words, a subtle change flickered in Tang San's eyes. Guling continued, "This is the most defining trait of the blue-silver grass, and its greatest strength as well. Its indomitable vitality. Yet you ignore the most prominent, vital advantage of the blue-silver grass, insisting instead on making it learn control techniques like binding or parasitic toxins. It's just like my ancient dragon martial soul. It formidable and uncanny offensive capabilities. Yet you force me to focus solely on defense for my entire life. What's the difference?" At this point, Tang San looked toward Yu Xiaogang, the corners of his mouth curling up as he said, "I think I finally understand now. Grandmother, your spirit theory has one major characteristic. That is, you first decide on a direction in your own mind for someone else's martial spirit. And then, regardless of what that spirit is actually best at, you force it to conform to that direction by any means necessary." Gulong produced a defense-type Vondaloo. So all Gulongs must follow the path of defense. You believe blue-silver grass is suited for control. So because blue-silver grass naturally possesses binding abilities, you must waste a spirit ring just to keep learning how to bind. Is this even researching martial spirits? It is clearly forcing the martial spirit to conform to your theories.